Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Duncan. I'm a certified financial therapist and art therapist and founder of the Money Healing Club, which is a place where even the most financially avoidant folks can get therapy-informed support. Reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not replace mental health care or financial advice. Please take care with where you get your advice. So the underlying thing I'm always working with, both in this podcast and in my financial therapy work, is this. What if your stress response to money isn't a personal failure, but more of a wound, something we can look at as a form of trauma even? Money stress can feel really isolating, but it's actually a collective experience when we can zoom out and see it systemically. Today's guest, I have Rahkim Sabree, who is a nationally recognized financial therapist, speaker, and Forbes contributor whose work sits right at the intersection of money and mental health and culture. We talk about his wonderful new book, Overcoming Financial Trauma, where he introduces a framework that helps individuals and organizations understand and heal their financial wounds, not just manage their money better, but actually redefine what success means in the first place and where harm comes from. What I appreciate most about Rahkim is he doesn't just talk about money as a numbers thing. It's not a spreadsheet problem. He talks about money as something that lives in our nervous systems, in our communities, in our histories. In this conversation, he and I explore what financial trauma actually is, how it shows up, not just individually, but systemically, and why so many of us feel alone in something that is actually deeply collective. We talk about generational patterns, workplace dynamics, and the benefit cliff, capitalism, the outdated software many of us are running when it comes to money. This talk is so layered and I hope very validating. Just a quick note. In this episode, we talk about housing loss due to fire, homelessness, poverty, systemic financial harm, and experiences of break-ins. As always, please take care of yourself and pause or skip this if you need to. So if you've ever thought, why does money feel so charged for me? Or why do I feel like I should have this figured out by now? I think this conversation could really help. Let's talk about what we don't usually say when we talk about financial trauma with the guy who wrote the book, Rahkim Sabree. Rahkim Sabree, welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast.
Thank you.
So we have a first question. We just want to dive right in. Could you tell me, how does financial trauma affect communities?
Yeah, I really love this question because I think my take on financial trauma views financial trauma as a societal issue more so than a personal one, right? So a lot of times when we talk about financial trauma, we talk about it through a first person lens that says, I experienced XYZ thing, right? As it relates to money. When we kind of take a step back and look at the various factors that influence financial trauma, down to how we're marketed to, right? Down to what conditions create our responses to the financial stress and the different stimuli that we experience. Many times these are systemic, and many times these are touching multiple people or groups of people and communities at the same time. What's interesting, or what I found to be interesting anyway, is that our financial socialization keeps us very isolated when it comes to discussing money. And so money has become a taboo. And like, I don't want other people to know that I'm struggling or that I've gone through this thing. And so either I won't talk about it or maybe I'll posture in a way that kind of makes me appear to be doing better than I am. My goal in kind of building on the work around financial trauma is to help people kind of detach their like self-worth and what they may perceive as personal failures from this phenomenon that we refer to as financial trauma and view it as more of a societal issue through the lens of capitalism, through the lens of systemic financial harm, through the lens of poverty and the way that it has been manufactured, right?
Yeah.
We live in a world where I think we now have a trillionaire, right? But we also have people who are hungry. We also have people who are homeless. And so what systems are in place that allow for this to exist?
and then walking this road as an individual, right? Then we have this layer of, well, we can't talk about it. So while there's all these systemic factors, we take it as personal and individual because we're not allowed to really see or discuss the more structural aspects of financial trauma. And actually, could we just back up a little bit? And, we kind of just rushed into financial trauma, and this might be a new term for folks listening. Could you just give us what's your quick definition of financial trauma yourself?
Yeah, I define financial trauma as any instance observed or experienced that has a negative impact on the way someone views, interacts with, or believes about money. And what I think really like about this definition, and there are various definitions out there, is that there's an emphasis placed on that observed piece. And so when I break down financial trauma, I talk about it through six lenses. And one of those lenses is the vicarious or observational lens, right? So it's not just what happened to us, but it's what we observe happening around us. The example that I like to give most frequently is probably how we see people who are homeless treated, right? Many times, the homeless population or the unhoused are treated as kind of like these social pariahs. They are viewed as, oh, if I give them money, they're going to go spend it on drugs,
Yeah.
or if I give them money, they're going to go spend it on alcohol, or they had something happen in their life where they messed up, right? Their situation is their fault, and that they should be doing more to get out of their situation.
There's that individualism again. Exactly.
Exactly. And so I think when we pull back the layers and we process what this is telling us as individuals, or what this is telling our nervous system, is it's that this idea of financial failure is unsafe, which is not inaccurate. And but to the extent that when we look at it from this lens of the haves versus the have-nots, we don't want to be in the category of the have-nots. Even if we technically qualify as a have-not, we want to posture and pretend that we are so far removed from that reality so that we're not treated in the way that individuals who are clearly defined or labeled as that are
Right.
treated.
On one hand, I could say, oh, well, of course, it would be unsafe and, health implications and all of that from, losing a home, which is true. But it's also, I can't be viewed as that. And that is just as strong because we're such social creatures. And
Right.
I think that comes into the familial domain, like you talked about, like the transmutation of these messages from generation to generation. Often, probably all of us have some intergenerational story of losing it all. I mean, this is a thing that has happened in probably the last 3 or 4 generations, likely in your family line. And so this message of like, you could lose it all, you could lose it all, don't lose it all, the story of struggle that is such a common human experience. We're carrying that in our bones, which you also talk about, which is like the epigenetic domain. So we got family domain, we got epigenetic domain, because trauma is transmuted through epigenetics. And when I think of trauma, I think it is learning. It's a form of learning, right? It's like, don't do that. That is super dangerous. So we're going to like really make sure we want us to be safe. We want the next generation to be safe. So like this dangerous thing happened. So avoid X, Y, and Z because that's dangerous, right? We do, hey, look both ways before you cross the road, right? All of this stuff. That's all
Mm-hmm.
we can say. Like trauma is also a path of learning for safety. From the mental health standpoint, though, where trauma becomes kind of maladaptive is where we perceive threat when there is none, or we overreact to threat that may or may not be there, right? And that's where we might feel stifled or avoid a topic completely. We get into black and white thinking and avoid it completely. And because of maybe financial trauma that had happened a couple generations before. And I think part of this process is that updated for now?
Right. And I think I love your phrasing there because so I'm reading a book right now called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Phenomenal book. Yeah, it's a great book. But the author does a really good job, and I literally just read this morning a part where he's like, "This is not the science. This is like a fictitious label that I'm using in describing the science." And what he does is he breaks down system one and system two thinking. System one being our automatic responses, which I kind of talk about through the triune brain framework, and then our like concentrated responses. Like, what are the things that we have to exert effort into doing? But he talks about, these systems almost as if they're like a program or they're like a software. And what I love about your phrasing in that particular moment was that our trauma brains may be operating on old software. And maybe across each generation, we get a little bit of an upgrade, right? Because we can add context, we can add nuance to what those upgrades look like. But the economic system that we're navigating is also a very old software, right? It's based off of a foundation of old software. And so even though we have technology advances over the last, I mean, if we look at the last 10 years, technology has gone crazy. But if you look at technology advances across generations, there's been significant growth. But the foundation of that system that our bodies and our minds are registering as the threat haven't changed. And so I think about like actual hardware, like an iPhone, or I had an old MacBook that just stopped updating because it was just so far out of date that it could not update anymore. And I think when it comes to our responses, not necessarily in the context of financial trauma by itself, but certainly financial trauma falls into this category, we have some outdated software that we haven't had the ability to update. And I think this concept of financial healing is our collective attempts, and everybody who acts as a financial healer, our collective attempts at helping people to upgrade their software, particularly if they're viewing their finances as a threat.
Yeah. And it's not to say like there aren't real threats there. Like there's huge systemic problems. And also they might be different now than the economic system has changed as well. And like we're not living in our parents' economy. So like there's that update as well. I think that what financial wellness looks like today, I do think substantially looks different than it looked 30 years ago. So like there's that updating as well. And the threats and the barriers, the challenges are real, and there are new ones. I do think there are new ones. We talk about like cost of living. Like this is a newer barrier. While it's always been there, it has really cranked up in recent years, where it is now a luxury item. Our housing is now a luxury item, and I'd say for a lot of my clients and a lot of folks I talk to, for their parents, it wasn't necessarily like it was a utility. It was expensive, but it wasn't the luxury item that it is now. So I think there's that updating as well. It comes up a lot when I work with folks who are maybe in their 30s and 40s, and they have these huge disagreements with their family, right? Because their family or their parents or the older generation is saying, well, I don't understand why don't you have retirement? Like, don't you make good
Mm-hmm.
money? And it's because like we're actually living in really different worlds right now than they did when they were younger adults and in that accumulation phase. And that's kind of the domain. Actually, I'd love to go through the 6 domains. I think you do such a nice job. Like, I think of it like these concentric circles, right? We've got the individual and then these circles
Yeah.
going out, which is actually a common model used in social work about like the different domains of living. I was wondering, could we go through those 6 real quick?
Absolutely, yeah. So the six sources of financial trauma, as I refer to them, are genetic or generational, right? So this is one category. So to your point earlier, that is not only the ideas that we pass down from generation to generation, that may be ideas around scarcity or vigilance, but also what is being passed down through our DNA. So through that epigenetic lens. The second is vicarious or observational. So it's what we're observing and our financial socialization that tells us what is safe and what's not safe. And in many cases, because we navigate capitalism, what we view as safe is having money, and what we view as not safe is not having money.
Yeah.
The third is workplace or employment financial trauma, which I think is really interesting to talk about. So this is where I talk about and Chantel Chapman is the coiner of this phrase, but the financial fawning and what that looks like in the workplace on both sides of the interview table, right? So you have to fawn to a degree to get the job, but then you have to fawn to a degree to keep the job or to get the promotion.
Yeah.
And so you're engaged in this active practice of what I refer to as economic warfare because you have to do what you have to do in order to get paid, right? Maybe that looks like going to happy hour. Maybe that looks like staying late, coming in early. Maybe that looks like doing things that are not in alignment with your values as a human being, but are in alignment with the values of the organization that you're working for, or at the very least, the leader that hires you.
Right. And it's a
And so
survival
that creates a clash,
strategy. Yeah. And
right?
fawning
It's a survival
is,
strategy.
I think of fawning as when you regularly and routinely cross your own boundaries to stay safe,
Right,
and we all
right.
do that.
And where do we do this more than in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, generational, observational, um, workplace.
Then we have financial
Uh,
instability, poverty slash
yes,
financial.
poverty and financial instability, right? So that is like your flagship financial trauma
Mhm.
experience, right? You experience bankruptcy, you experience homelessness, you experience uh, too low wages, right? So maybe you have a job, but you're just not making enough money.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people will view this particular sort of financial trauma as the personal failure,
Yeah.
right? And so they're just like, no, well, this is where I'm at, right? And so they'll either, I've seen people move in the direction of fighting, like becoming extremely vigilant and fighting against this, or people, I hate to phrase it in this way, but become very passive and just kind of like accept. And so I talk about this learned
I
helplessness.
don't love that term either, but it really does describe a phenomenon of like, well, I'll
Yeah,
never make more money, or
right,
kind of there's these internal scripts. I can't ever make more money. It'd be wrong to make more money. There's so much self-worth tied into this, and that's probably also from all these other domains you've been talking about, right? The lessons I've absorbed about what I can and cannot do on an income scale. These are very
right.
deep things.
Yeah, and so when I talk about that one, I like to reference the study around learned helplessness because I don't think that people arrive to that place without trying, right? Like people try, and despite their effort, because they don't know the best ways, maybe how to navigate financial systems, or maybe they do know the best ways, but and this is another source that we haven't talked about yet, the systemic
Yeah.
or institutional barriers that exist prevent them
Yeah.
from making progress, then they're just like, well, damned if I do, damned if I don't. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna make the best of the situation
I,
that I'm in.
I want to hang out in the systemic part because especially in the United States, we do not have a graduated system of support. It is a cutoff system where if you earn
Mm,
below this amount, you get support. If you earn above this exact dollar amount, you get no support. And
right,
it makes navigating the system so difficult, right? Because the support is support, but then if I literally earn $1 over this amount, I won't get any of it. And that I think adds into the struggle of economic mobility because of the way the system is. I've had clients who have received support in different ways. It's like the amount of times I have to say that I am broke, the amount of ways I have to say that I am poor. Like, how can I not learn any other script? Because I have to literally put it on a piece of paper, many times a
yes,
year to prove this. So it's like, but then societal level, oh, why don't these people just like, make more money or whatever? And it's like not understanding how that system reinforces these scripts and really prevents a lot of economic mobility because of the structural ways it's set up.
right, right. And that shows up, I mean, so many ways, both intimate in terms of experiences that I've had and or observed directly, and also just, in my professional experience. I had a conversation, I think I shared this in the book, at the National Association for Social Workers Connecticut chapter. There was a conference, and I was talking to a group of social workers about financial trauma through the lens of the benefit cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the social working population gets it
Yeah.
because they're like, I see this all the time. But if you don't work in that space or you're not experiencing that directly, then it's very easy for somebody to jump on a platform like Twitter and say, oh, these people need to work harder, they need to make more money.
Yeah.
But you don't realize how much you lose in crossing that, like you said, that $1. And now it's just like, okay, now the maybe $5 that I got as a raise is not going to cover the cost of food and
Yeah.
transportation and housing that was being taken care of previously. I'm comfortable where I'm at. I'm gonna stay right here.
Yeah. That's not worth
And then
exactly.
it's not. From a mathematical perspective, it's not worth it. It like the popular phrase, the math is not mathing. But where this becomes a very slippery slope And, going back to this idea of poverty and financial instability as a source of financial trauma and that generational genetic financial trauma is that people then learn to pass on these benefits across generation. So then the expectation then becomes, I have this, I'm going to give this benefit to my child. All you have to do to maintain this benefit is, and then they learn the ins and outs of what it takes to maintain that benefit. But now it's not that the aspiration to do better is not present. It's that the fear of being on your own is overriding. This is like a safety thing, right? It's not just, oh, I'm scared and so I'm not going to do anything. I have like you talk about the cost of living. You talk about like living being a luxury, which is crazy to say, but it's something that I'm experiencing and I'm experiencing in real time, right? So, and then we talk about this offline, but sharing with your podcast audience, in October of 2025, I lost my home to a fire, and so in coming in from financial services background, understanding financial systems, understanding financial trauma, just finished writing a book on financial trauma to talk about how to navigate these experiences. I have this flashpoint experience, right? Everything that I own, my assets, everything going burnt up in a fire. And so in the process, I had experienced about 30 days of homelessness where I was living in a hotel. Unfortunately, I had a roof over my head, but technically I was homeless, right? And then I ended up in an apartment. And when I initially saw the apartment, I was in love. I was like, "Oh, this is great!" It's marketed as a luxury apartment, so there's that word again, luxury. I see the unit. The units that they showed me were studio and one bedroom. It's just me and my dog, so I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I could look at a studio, one bedroom." But I knew that I was not going to be paying for it. My insurance was going to be paying for it, and so I said, "You know what? Let me take a look at the two bedroom." And so that's where I landed, on the two bedroom. So they give me the prices. The rent for the two bedroom apartment, less than 1,000 square feet, or maybe just around 1,000 square feet, is twice what I was paying my mortgage. And it's considered luxury.
God.
Twice what I was paying in my mortgage, and it's less space. So for context, I own a duplex with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom on each unit. So six bedrooms, 2 bathrooms in total, plus my yard, plus my garage. I have 2-car garage, and I had 1,200 square feet in each unit.
Oh, so this was
So I've
also
downsized.
a rental property for you.
It was a rental property. It wasn't currently being rented.
But still, like that's
But yes.
that's again
Absolutely.
another layer of like an asset to be lost.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so when I look at the downsizing process for the luxury that I'm trading it in for, right? And they throw that word around because they give you amenity. There's a gym. There's a laundry on each floor, which is not. It's 2 washing machines, 2 drying machines. There's a rooftop. Like there's all these things that they're like advertising, but I go through the walkthrough. I love the apartment. I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I'm getting. And then I'm here. And so for the first week, I'm like loving it. But then I get into week 2 and I get into week 3 and I start to notice that the architecture is so like rushed that there are imperfections everywhere.
Yeah, slapdash.
So we talk about this concept of luxury, right? It's like they threw this building up as quickly as they could so that they can lease it out as quickly as they could, and so they can sell on this premise of luxury. Of course, they're taxing because it's a new build and a quote unquote luxury apartment, but the quality of the architecture is so shoddy, right? And so I'm in the millennial age demographic, so there are a lot of people within my age group who are like, I want to own a house, but it's too expensive to own a house. And fortunately, I got in 2016, so my mortgage was super low when I bought. But I'm like, man, like it's cheaper to own a house than it is to rent. And so like this reality is flip-flop depending on time, which is influenced by, of course, as we have been talking about, the systems that we navigate.
Totally. And gosh, this story is I've been reading your stuff and watching your content as you've been sharing the reality of these huge transitions you've been navigating. I'm so glad you're safe. We were actually scheduled to record this the day after the fire, and I've just been like really I've just felt very connected and really feeling for you, and how I even noticed in your book that you had done a TEDx talk about buying this property years ago. I mean, how meta. And it was like the month that your book was coming out. And I'm curious, like, yeah, we're talking about cost of living, which is, I think, a really worthwhile topic. And like, there's kind of a trauma in this. Like, I gotta live somewhere. And the cost of it, like, how do we tread water, if our cost of living is so high and we're trying to make a living, and that's harder than ever. And I'm curious, just like in these last few months of navigating this true roller coaster, also after having unpacked being a homeowner and what that meant for you and your family and your story and all of that, like, where are you landing now on your relationship to being a homeowner?
This is a great question, and I feel incredibly blessed. Period. Right? Like, I don't want to put any sauce or anything on that. I think like that is a statement that stands on its own. I feel incredibly blessed to be in the situation that I'm in, to be able to have housing so quickly. I mean, that's relative, right? That's why I said 30 days I was in a hotel, but to be able to have housing so quickly and to kind of be rebounding in the way that I'm rebounding. I'm about a mile from my house, so I can go. I mean, I technically could walk over there, but I go check on the property every so often. But it is, like you said, it's like pulling a scab off of a wound. Every time I go by the house, I see the ruins of the fire, right? Everything's boarded up inside. There's clear water damage everywhere. So it's soggy, it's moldy. I mean, I've had the property vandalized, I think 3 times.
No.
Yeah, people have broken in, stole all the
Oh,
copper.
yeah.
There were people who were sleeping there, who were doing drugs there. Like, I had to call the police out a couple of times. Unfortunately, in all the times that I've been there, nobody was there, but there was
Yeah.
evidence, right, of things of mine being touched, being moved.
Oh, we just talk about like that violation, right? Like there's sort
Oh,
of
so it feels
violating
super violating,
after violating. Like, oh,
super violating.
yeah,
And so now I'm having to go through, like, what do these mitigation efforts look like to make sure that the house is not accessible?
yeah,
And in talking to the different professionals that I work with, including the police, they're like, look, if somebody wants to get in, like, they're gonna get in. And it kind of, I think, like, the hair in the back of my neck kind of stands up when I think about it, because there was this, I'll use the word illusion of security in being in the structure, where I was like, oh, nobody, like, I'll go to bed every night, nobody's gonna break in, like, nobody can break in. But like, to see how easy it was for somebody to access the property when I was gone, like when they thought that nobody was there and nobody's coming back, let me know how easy it would have been for somebody to access the property while I was there.
yeah, right.
But again, like, going back to this framing of like being blessed, I'm still extremely proud of the accomplishment, right? I bought my house when I was 26 years old.
Wow.
I got it for like a good rate. I think my interest rate was 2.25, but
Ooh,
like now, like, interest rates are, yeah.
I'm giving lots of snaps for that. I know, man. I got a 3% mortgage rate. It's like,
Yeah,
oh wow. Didn't realize how good we had it back then.
right.
Yeah,
But of course, there's a trauma of every time the month turns, I have to pay the mortgage on the house that I'm not living in,
yeah,
right? And I have to, like, there is the financial burden of maintaining that obligation through this season, where I'm not full-time employed by anybody. Like, I work for myself.
yeah,
So what the added layer of entrepreneurial stress looks like,
yeah.
and how do you go out and find money so that you can pay your mortgage in a house that you're not living in, right?
Right.
I was gonna say, this is all, of course, offset by the fact that my insurance is covering my living expenses here. But like, if I had to do both, I feel like that would be impossible.
Right. That's the tipping point. In so
Yeah.
many, I know so many Americans are one accident, one health issue away from being
Yes.
unhoused, right? And so you realize, like you said, like, oh, I had this illusion of security, and wow, one event really can turn it all. And that's so true for so many of us. And I'm also thinking, like, from a mental health standpoint, when we talk about trauma, the thing about it is it's like this back to our metaphor of the computer. It's like there's this program running now that is taking up your bandwidth. Right, even in a low level, like, it's so, you're safe, you're secure, you have a few months behind you, but I'm just wondering, like, it's sort of there. Like you said, like you go past it and you see, vandalism. And it's got to be like this running thing. And that's the thing with trauma, is that it's like it's taking up your bandwidth of this reminder that you're not safe, or that there are threats to be dealt with, whether or not there really are. And that limits your ability to think about the future, to have the capacity for whatever it is you're doing right now. I just want to illustrate, like, that's another reason why we need to look at trauma, because it takes up our bandwidth, because our body will want us to be safe first. Like, it will reprioritize everything for physical safety.
Yes.
And so, like, we both took the trauma of money course, and I think one of the most useful things I learned from it is when we experience financial trauma, financial instability, it's sort of like the blinders go on and we're literally unable to think about anything but the present moment. Like, our brain is like all systems on the right now, which totally makes sense. It's completely logical. Like, if you're not, not being able to plan for the future or sit down or take a risk, you're not going to be taking risks, right? You're not going to be maybe sitting in a place of nuance, or, I mean, not talking to you, I'm talking in general. This is how I look at trauma, and I'm just wondering if that lands for you.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Probably more for me than I think anybody. When we look at it just from an educational lens, right? Like, we can talk about trauma all day, and we could take the courses, and we could read the books, and we could write the books, right? This is my reality.
Which you did.
Right? And then 30 days before the book comes out, there's this experience, and it's like, I've talked to so many peers in the space, financial therapists and otherwise. Talked to Chantel directly, right? Trauma Money, and she's like, I don't know what this means, but I feel like it means something. That you are writing this book and you are having to experience it at the same time, and it's shitty, yes, but like, what does this mean? And so, like, I've spent a lot of time over the last month or so kind of like in the back of my mind really trying to determine meaning, until I'm like, oh well, maybe there is no meaning. Maybe it's just like, this is what happened, and now, like, I have a choice, and the choice then becomes, do you let the old program run, or do you opt into choosing a new program? And so I think, like, everything that you said is spot on, but I also think that when you become trauma informed or trauma responsive, which is kind of like the space that I'm occupying, you can then take action to acknowledge the trauma occurred, which certainly it has, acknowledge the manifestations of trauma, which I've seen, right? Like, it took me a very long time to be able to light a candle after the fire. Like, seeing fires on TV and in movies triggered me. Seeing any kind of natural disaster actually triggered me, but fires in particular, smelling smoke triggered me. I still have belongings that smell like smoke that I've retrieved from the house.
I bet.
So there are things that I recognize are triggering my body. Where in my mind, I'm like, I'm good, like, I'm safe. I know that I'm safe. I can tell myself that I'm safe, but my body is responding to certain triggers, and so I can say, okay, what are the activities or exercises that I need to engage in to help regulate my nervous system in this moment? And most people don't have the language or the techniques to engage in that way, and so they operate on this loop. I talk about my dad a lot in the book, and not funny, but there's irony here. My dad experienced a fire.
Really?
Probably around the age that I am now.
Really?
When he was around my age, he lived in an apartment though, and he did not have renter's insurance. And so my dad got it, like, probably better than anybody. And he's like, son, like, I understand.
Wow.
And he's like, I don't want to minimize the experience that you've had, but I want you to focus on the blessing that is the fact that this was space that you owned and that you had insurance. He's like, because when I experienced my fire,
that was it.
I had to really rebuild from zero.
Yeah. Along with the trauma. I mean, that is so, like, this is what we're talking about, like the generational shifts and changes, right? There can be these, scripts or these shared experiences, but also with your ability to become a homeowner, right? And what that means, that this is not something that, could be as dangerous for you as it could have been for someone who does not own the property, right? That this deciding factor of what it means to have an asset.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Wow. Rakima, I'm actually wondering, you tell so many great stories in the book. One thing I really loved is your stories about your family and growing up. I'm thinking also as we're thinking about like kind of trauma recovery and healing, the top down and the bottom up approaches to healing.
Oh,
And your
yes.
stories about the drumming and your kind of connection to somatic healing that is not a new thing for you, that this comes from your family and your childhood. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you brought this up. I don't talk about it often, but when I was focused on the healing piece of financial trauma, and of course, we talk about somatic healing and trauma of money, but uh, it didn't land with me as I was going through the course until I read both The Body Keeps the Score and My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what chapter it was, but I think it was one of the opening chapters. Resmaa says, trauma is not a mind event, it's a body event.
Yeah.
And he's talking about trauma generalized. But so much of my approach to dealing with financial trauma up until that point, and of course, I'm coming into this from a financial background, was narrative based. It was like, how do we talk our way through this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, no, like I've been getting this wrong. The somatic pieces are non-negotiable because it's happening in our body. And so when I got to sit down and start processing, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that show up? What are the practices that we can engage in? I'm somebody who likes to collect like certifications and designations and stuff. So I'm like, oh, let me go get certified and becoming a somatic, healing practitioner. I stopped as I was writing and I was like, wait a second, like this has been a part of my life, all of my life.
Yeah.
And so the story that you're referencing, I talk about spending time at my grandfather's house. And in the morning when we would wake up, my grandfather would play drumming, play like these African drums. And like that was kind of like, it's time to wake up, guys. But and as a part of that process, my grandfather was very intentional with a lot of the things that he did with us that I'm only realizing and now. And my grandfather, I think he passed away in 2005, so he's been gone for like just over 10 years now. It wasn't 2005, it's 2015. I'm sorry, 2015. But I'm like, there's so many things that I experienced where I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and ask him about this, or man, I
Yeah.
could go back, wish I could go back and talk to him about this, because he knew, but like he also knew that at that point in our lives, we weren't like at a place where we can like receive it all.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say it all the time. He's like, I'm planting seeds, I'm planting seeds, I'm planting seeds. But anyway, he would have us get up. We would have drums playing. He would have us go through like just do chores like I think any normal family would, but we all had our assigned tasks, and so we would clean the space, and then he would have us sit and meditate.
Mm.
I'm like, what do we know about meditating at like I don't know 5, 10 years old? But he would have us sit, and we would sit and like you know legs crossed, and we would close our eyes, and we would just sit there and listen to the music and breathe. And a lot of times I think we felt like it was punishment, but it was regulation. He introduced us to Tai Chi as a practice. He introduced us to different martial arts as a practice. And then as children, of course, we have so much energy. And so his wisdom had us learn how to regulate and then take us to a designated time and space, which was we would go to the park and go burn off that energy.
Right.
So we'd go and we'd run around and we'd play, and he'd let us do what we do, and then there would be time for us to come back, and then we would regulate again.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this practice in particular that he used to have us do. He would refer to as summoning chi, and so he's exposing us to this concept of chi, which is an Eastern concept that refers to life energy. And so he would have us like in this very almost flamboyant way, like gather the energy with our hands as we inhale, and then hold it, and then push the energy out as we exhale. And we're just going along with the process. We don't know what we're doing. We're just like, all right, whatever he's telling us to do.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime we were hurt, anytime we were scared, anytime we were angry, he would be like, summon chi, summon chi. If we're doing martial arts and there was contacts made, summon chi. Like this is how you regulate. So like you're not responding from the anger. If you get slapped in the face, you're not reacting, right? Summon chi. If we fall and we scrape our knee, summon chi, right? And so it taught us how to deal with pain. It taught us how to deal with whatever the dysregulation in our physical space was. But I don't think, I certainly didn't. I won't speak for my siblings. I don't think that we processed what was happening on a mental and emotional level in terms of what that regulation looks like.
And it speaks to, like, we're talking so much recently in current times about nervous system regulation, what we're learning, but it's like these practices have, there are many, many lineages of these practices. This is not new stuff at
Right.
all. And the other aspect of this, as I'm hearing you tell these stories, is is the co-regulation, that this was together, right? That he seemed to be kind of a beacon or anchor point of that, but it was there's something about doing it together that must have
Oh, yeah.
been a huge part of that, and of course a practice that you can take on your own, but there's a connective quality to getting into the chi space, or into that more regulated space with your siblings, with your family, with your grandfather.
Yeah. And I just add this really quickly because when you said that word co-regulated, I got like a chill. So I keynoted AFCPE's conference in 2025. That was the morning closing keynote. Erica Wasserman, who, shout out to Erica, also a financial therapist, she was the closing keynote for that evening. But I was freaking out because I knew that I had agreed to doing this keynote, and then I had signed the contract, and this was like money, right? That I was expecting. So I was like, I can't back out, right? Like I bought my ticket, like the hotel, everything's taken care of. Like I have to show up and do this thing. And so I show up to Phoenix, and I'm in a frantic, and I'm like, how do I be present for this conference?
And this was soon after the incident.
This was immediately out. So
Oh my
the
god.
fire happened October 18th. The conference was November 18th.
Oh
So
my
literally
gosh.
30 days after. And it was the day that my book launched.
Oh
So
my gosh.
conference started November 18th. My book launched November 18th. I had my books present. So how do I sell these books or be present in the conference and prepare for this keynote? And much of the AFCPE community I'm connected with,
Yeah.
right, on
Yeah.
social media.
They
So they
knew.
knew about what had happened.
Yeah.
And so people were stopping me in the hallway and they're like, oh, how are you doing? And people were hugging me. And, there's a lot of reliving the trauma and sharing the story.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody wants to know what's going on. So I'm practicing my keynote the days before, and I can't get through it. Like I can't even get through half of it. As I'm telling the story, or as I'm working through the pieces that I want to, like, I'm not even telling the story. I wasn't even sure I was going to tell the story at this point. I'm working through the pieces. I'm feeling my body like fight me.
Yeah.
My heart rate, getting lightheaded. Like I can't. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And so I finally resigned to, excuse me, the night before. And I'm going to do this keynote, whatever happens, right? If I have to read the words off of the page, but that's not my speaking style,
Yeah.
right? Like I like to talk, but I said, at least I'll have this as a backup so that I can fulfill the obligation. So I wrote out the entire keynote. I get on stage the day of, and I start and I say, I want to engage in a practice of call and response, right? And so I say something, you say something. I say something, you say something. So we engage in the call and response practice. And basically it was a question, like, how are you guys doing? But I had like jazzed it up. So it's, got, men in the room, how are you guys feeling? Women in the room, how are you guys feeling? They're responding. And I'm like, well, I'm not good, right? Like, and I want to acknowledge that I'm not good in this moment. And I also want to acknowledge that many of my peers and colleagues in this space have let me know that it's okay for me not to be good in this
Yeah.
moment. But I'm going to work through this this keynote with you guys as I'm experiencing this in real time.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they held a lot of space for me in that moment. But this is the point that I was trying to make. I said, before we get into all of this, I need us all to take a deep inhale and exhale, right? And so my slide said Wusa on it. And so there was this collective practice of well over 100 people co-regulating
Yeah.
in the space with me. And what I had shared with them around the science of that was what we know, right, to be true. Human beings look for safety in other human beings as groups, right? We're social creatures. And so I said, I want to know that I'm safe with you, and I want you to know that you're safe with me. This is a heavy topic that we're about to talk about. And so I want us to go into this grounded and regulated together. And so that practice of Some and Chi showed up in the keynote. I didn't call
Thanks,
it that, but I was
Grandpa.
like, I wanted to take a deep, right? I want to call it a deep inhale
Yeah.
and exhale. And there's a picture that they caught that I love, where like you see me with my hands like out, like you can't see like me motioning it on the screen, but my hands out. And I'm like, I love that picture because it shows like this is that moment.
Yeah.
So
We
yeah,
just
that
take a
was
beat, and I think also, yeah, it's co-regulating. It's, can I be vulnerable in this moment and still be here without, the trauma responses are real, and sometimes that happens to keep us safe, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like those are understandable reactions, but to consciously, this is the top down and the bottom up response. I know that I'm safe. I'm feeling unsafe. So I'm going to do a bottom up, like co regulating, so that I can feel safe, so that I can get through this and also make it even better. And all the while, you're expanding your own capacity for sitting with discomfort, as well as everyone else's capacity for sitting with discomfort. That we're not going to react and into a trauma response because we don't need to, because we actually do know that we're safe, right? So I love in the book and in the story that's like, I'm going to take what I know to be true logically. I know I'm going to honor what my body is doing right now, and I'm going to come to the middle with the tools that I know and bring everyone in. Talk about it, man. You walk your talk, dude. You walk your talk. I love that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it was a phenomenal keynote. And I'm not saying that because I did it, but like there was a standing ovation. I mean, the line of people that wanted to talk
I
to me
bet.
afterwards and share their experiences and how healing that talk was just out of this world.
Yeah.
It was everything I could have asked for and more.
I bet. I bet. Well, I want to show everyone your beautiful book. Your beautiful book here. I've already got like tags and stuff. So, Overcoming Financial Trauma, Rahkim Sabree, is available on all platforms. I will also link to my bookshop that you can help support my work by buying the book through that. Rahkim, thank you. We could sit here and talk about all the dimensions of financial trauma all day long, but I do want to ask you the question that I ask all my guests towards the end of our talk was, if you could summon a little chi and take a beat and open up your receptive right side of your brain. And if I ask you, I want to ask you a question. I want you to respond with your first intuitive hit without judgment, which is, if you were to picture your money as a creature in this moment, what do you get?
I would say a dog.
A dog. Yeah. Tell me about the dog.
I would say a dog. So I have a dog. His
Yeah.
name is Loki. Loki was saved from the fire as
Yay,
well.
Loki.
Yes. And the reason why I think about Loki in this moment is because he's 5 years old. He's a Aussie lab mix, a ball of energy. Me and Loki had to go to obedience school and have some foundational training for him. And when I think about when I take Loki out for a walk, right, especially in this new space that we're in, because he experienced trauma too,
Yeah.
and he experienced separation anxiety, and he went from living in his own house to now being in an apartment with all of these new smells and all of these new people and all of these new dogs. When we're walking by somebody, Loki wants to greet them, but he lunges. And so to other people, he appears to, because he's a black dog, he appears to be threatening. Like I've seen people like, nope, I'm not getting on the elevator with you. Are you sure he's good? Like I don't want him to bite me. And I'm like, he's good. Like he's so innocent. But I think about training in this analogy when it comes to money. And Loki can be well behaved. Like we have sat on the elevator and he's done exactly what I've told him. I'm like, Loki, put your butt down. That's how I told him to sit and wait, and he does what I tell him. And then there's moments where he gets chaotic and I have him on a leash and he's kind of like trying to drag me down the street and I have to rein him in and like, hey, that's not how we're behaving today. I think of money in that way,
Yeah.
right? Money is a tool, and the way that we engage with money, I think, is how we would engage with a dog that's very
Yeah.
curious, right? That's and that leash and being able to rein it in and recognize like, hey, there's a trauma trigger, or maybe there's not a trauma trigger. Maybe there is just an assault on our nervous system that says you need to buy this item or you need to spend money in this way, or you need to try and regulate yourself by spending money. And we have to kind of yank that leash a little bit and say, hey, like, this is the plan. Let's stick to the plan. Because I think that, like Loki, if we do not rein in our experiences with money, that Loki would jump over whoever walks by, right? And I think the analogy here with money is that we will use our money on whatever we can use our money on to make us feel safe or to make us feel satisfied or to make us feel whatever. And so we have to have limits and we have to articulate what those limits are. And so Loki knows what his limits are. And sometimes he needs to be reminded, many times he needs to be reminded. But that's my job as, Loki's custodian, right? To remind him, like, these are what the limits look like.
I love that also because it's not just your money is a creature, that creature, it's the relationship you have, right? That like
Yes.
I'm the one who kind of knows what's up and that money's going to do what money's going to do and is going to react, but it ultimately does come down to this relationship that we have, right? And it's still closeness, it's not punishing, right? But it is there's a closeness, that co-regulation we've talked about, that like ultimately he is grounded by you, right? Not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah. Well, probably is. He probably grounds you too in other times, right?
He definitely does. He definitely does. But when we're in the confines of our space, right? Like if we're outside in the open field, I'm not gonna take his leash off and let him go run crazy.
Yeah, because
He might run into the street, get hit by a car,
yeah.
right? So we have to know like when is it appropriate for us to kind of let loose, and when is it appropriate for us to, based over our environment, kind of keep things close.
Yeah, right. Which we're talking security, we're talking attachment, we're talking like that healing, creating more ground beneath us is actually knowing those things and knowing that it's dynamic, that it's not always the same, right? Sometimes he's in a mood, sometimes you're in a mood, I'm guessing, right? Like that we need to
Yeah, no,
also
100%.
be dynamic and nimble, and all of this actually creates this sense of safety and stability. Yeah. Well, Rahkim, thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful that you are safe, that Loki is safe. I look forward to also just witnessing your healing. I hope to be part of your healing and your healing community. And as the next chapters unfold, probably more books, I'm guessing, about this. And I've really loved getting to know you, and also your book is quite excellent. I'm going to recommend it to all my clients and colleagues. So everyone check out Overcoming Financial Trauma by Rahkim Sabree. And Rahkim, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
That's the Money Healing Club podcast, everyone. And now a little honest money moment because, hey, that's what we do here. I want you to know that it costs about $400 to produce each episode of this podcast. Right now, that is funded through my other financial therapy work. So my ask is this: if this show has helped you feel less ashamed, less alone, more grounded in your money life, I'd love for you to support it financially if you can. Go on over to moneyhealingclub.com/podcast and you'll see a button to help support the show. Think of it as helping keep this a soft place to land, open and running for all. So if you're craving more support, there's lots of other financial therapy goodness happening at moneyhealingclub.com, from group programs to courses and other ways to work together. You don't have to do this alone. Production support for the podcast by Sydney Harbosky at sydneyharbosky.com. We are also a proud member of the Feminist Podcasters Collective, where creators are building podcasts in a better world together. I will see you next time.